No disclaimers for this one. So, welcome to my most disappointing reads of 2020. I am actually pretty excited to make this video because A, I only have 5 books to talk about, and B, that means that I had a pretty good reading year overall. Like, I read 55 books this year. I only really disliked 5 of them. So that feels really promising. I don't know about you, but 5 books is not really that bad. However, these are 5 books that I have some pretty strong feelings about. So, might as well just go right on into this video. The first one I want to talk about is an arc that I read this year, and that was She's Too Pretty to Burn by Wendy Hurd. This book actually doesn't come out until 2021, but I got an arc of it from NetGalley and I was able to read it, and unfortunately I really did not like this book. So from the way that this book was marketed, I had assumed that it would be a Picture of Dorian Gray retelling. It would be sort of in the same vein as Heather's, a lot of murder, a lot of gray morality, and a little bit of a satire as well. So that's what I went into expecting from this book, and I definitely did not get any of that from this book. I could see where in this book it would seem to be sort of a Picture of Dorian Gray retelling, but it was very, very loose, and the parts that I would have wanted to see in this book definitely weren't there. And then it also definitely didn't have that Heather's aspect where it felt like a satire or where it was like super murderous-y. I don't know what kind of like adjective you'd use for that, but there just wasn't a lot of murders happening, at least not in the way that I had expected them to. So I don't want to go into too many spoilery details, but I will say that I had been under the impression that at least the main character and possibly her love interest would be very hands-on in the murders that happen in this book, but they are absolutely 100% not. They are never even part of the murders at all, so that was kind of thrown out the window, and that was definitely very disappointing because I had expected something similar to Heather's or similar to Kill the Boy Band or whatever. That didn't happen. But something that really irked me about this book was the dubious consent that was like present throughout the entire thing. The main character isn't really comfortable with a lot of the things that are happening, but then like the love interest is constantly pushing her to like, I want to kiss you, so I'm just gonna kiss you, and even if you are like weirded out about it, like you don't want it, I'm still gonna kiss you either way. And like the main thing is that the main character hates having her picture taken. She does not want to have her picture taken, and she's very, very adamant about it and gets very upset when her picture is taken. So when the love interest takes her picture and is like, I promise I'm not gonna like show it to anybody, it's not gonna go anywhere, I'm not gonna do anything with it, she ends up doing a lot of stuff with that picture, and it goes viral, and it completely breaks the trust with the main character, and she never really apologizes for it. She never tries to make it up to her. She never is like, oh, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again, because she kind of just like keeps doing whatever she wants to do. I don't see where any chemistry comes into play between the main character and her love interest. There's like no real foundation for a genuine, even like friendship. So I don't see the romance in this book at all. And then there's also a scene, which I talk about in my review, where the love interest takes a very sexy picture of the main character in her underwear. It's very sexual, and she ends up putting it up for auction, and a lot of these adults are placing money for the auction of this sexual picture of a 17-year-old. And it's just very icky to me. It just seems really weird. I don't love that. So there were a lot of just like issues that I had with this book. I feel like there's a huge difference between being like satirical and dark and, you know, pushing the boundaries, and then also just being like kind of gross. And I feel like it was really towing the line for that boundary, and I wasn't comfortable with it, which is super unfortunate because this is like a sapphic thriller type of novel, which I was super excited about, and like the cover's gorgeous. But I really just didn't like this book at all. At all. Nothing even like kind of redeeming of it. Even the writing style was like questionable. I didn't love it. And then it was set in San Diego, and I'm like from around that area. Like I lived down really south, like Riverside, for like 5 years of my life. It didn't seem very San Diego to me. Moving on, this one is a sequel, and it is Court of Lions by Samaya Dowd, and I really did not like this book either. It was really promising in the first half because I did like the first book from this series, Mirage. I really liked it, and I was super excited for the sequel. So I bought the sequel right when it came out. I was so excited. I was gonna buddy read it with a bunch of friends. And that buddy read didn't really end up like working out very well, but that's totally fine. I ended up finishing the book, and I'm kind of sad that I finished it because I ended up being super disappointed in it. I feel like if I explain too much of what I was disappointed about, it'll be a huge spoiler. But just know that the reason I disliked The Rise of Skywalker is the same reason I disliked this book. You know how in The Rise of Skywalker, Rey ends up becoming Rey Skywalker? Like, everything just like ties together so perfectly. It's all about the Skywalkers, and you know, lo and behold, she's a Skywalker. So, you know, everything like Rey Nobody did not matter. So the same reason I was disappointed by The Rise of Skywalker is the same reason I was disappointed by Court of Lions. That's all I had to say, because if I go too deep into it, it'll become a spoiler, like a massive, huge spoiler. The next book I was disappointed by was A River of Royal Blood by Amanda Joy. And this one was another huge disappointment because I went into it thinking I was gonna love it. I was really excited for it, but so many of the elements in this book just were really lackluster and weren't really developed enough for me to be invested in this story. I think this book really could have been a lot better if it had been dual perspectives. I would have really liked to see the point of view from both the main character and also her sister, who she has to fight to the death with. I feel like that would have really helped this book out a lot, because the main character, while I like her, she's not exactly the most interesting character in the world. I felt like her sister was way more interesting, and I would have loved to see her perspective. And I was also really let down by the love interest in this book. He was super bland, super one-dimensional. I was so bored by him. I could not understand how the main character was attracted to him. He was so boring. He was like a little like just like cardboard cutout of a person. I was like, who cares about him? He was so like forgettable. And I feel like from the cover of this book, where the two sisters are like menacingly looking at each other, like ready to battle, I really expected this book to have a lot of action in it, but there's really not very much action at all, so I was a little disappointed in that as well. Overall, this felt like kind of a really generic sort of fantasy first book, and I was really disappointed by it. I had so many more expectations for it. I felt like a lot of people who had sort of similar taste to me in reading really enjoyed this book, and I was really sad that I did not enjoy it. However, I feel like while I didn't like the first book, it felt a lot like a setup for the second book, and I'm hoping that the second book I will just absolutely love. So I'm definitely gonna read the second book. It'll probably be as an audiobook, but I will definitely read it. The next book was just absolutely god-awful. Probably the worst book out of these. Well, maybe, it might be tied, but probably one of the worst books out of these 5. And that is The Lux by Anna Godberson. Oh my gosh, this book was awful. And it wasn't because like anything was super problematic or anything. It was just so boring. Like nothing happened. And this book kind of started off like hoping that the reader would already care about all these characters, and guess what? I did not care about any of these characters. Not even by the end did I care. It was just kind of like things happened and then they didn't happen, and then things happened and then they didn't happen, and it was over. These characters and their lives were so boring. All of like the drama that was supposed to be going on was super boring. It felt like this book was trying to be a historical Gossip Girl sort of book, but it didn't really hit the mark. Like none of the drama was interesting, none of the characters were interesting, none of the character relationships were interesting. It was so boring. I don't even know how I was able to finish this book. I did read it as an audiobook, so that might have been why, but even still, it was just like, it was so dry. There was nothing, no substance to it. It was awful. I just like would recommend this to my worst enemy. And the last book might be controversial because it is a really big favorite for a lot of people, and that is Sadie by Courtney Summers. I really didn't like this book, even though there were definite like redeeming qualities for this book that I really enjoyed. Overall, it just was not a book for me. I didn't really like hearing from Sadie's perspective. It felt like every time it came to be her chapter, it was just repetitive. It was like the same things felt like they were happening over and over and over again, and she didn't seem to be changing or progressing or developing in any sort of characteristic way. It felt like the same Sadie was at the end that had been at the beginning, which was a little disappointing because in Monday's Not Coming, which is very similar to Sadie, it did feel like Claudia, the main character, had gone through a lot of character development and character progression. But in Sadie, Sadie was the same Sadie the entire time, which was kind of annoying because in the first place, I didn't feel like Sadie as a character had a lot of substance. It felt like her entire character was about her sister and that's it. That was all Sadie was about, was her sister. Sadie does not have a life besides her sister. She does not have a personality besides wanting to find her sister. Sadie begins and ends with her sister, which is a little disappointing because in Monday's Not Coming, something similar happens with Claudia. She feels like a lot of her identity is tied to her friend Monday, but she's still Claudia. She's still like a whole person with a personality, even if she feels like a lot of her identity is tied to Monday. She still has a life and she still finds herself beyond Monday. Sadie, that does not happen with her. So that's kind of my huge discrepancy with this novel. However, the things I did like about it were the podcast chapters of this book, which were a lot. I was really glad that it focused a lot on the podcast. Probably a little bit more, maybe equal to Sadie. So at least I was able to kind of get through these Sadie chapters and look forward to the podcast chapters because those were done so well. Like, I loved the narrative of the podcast. I loved the narrator for the podcast. I loved, you know, hearing all of like the different sides from Sadie's family and, you know, everyone that they interviewed. It was so well done. Really, the reason why this book suffered was unfortunately the title character. Sadie just could not carry the book. She didn't have enough substance. She didn't have enough character, not enough development. It was just very boring. So like I said, if you want Sadie but done better, check out Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. It was just chef's kiss, amazing book. Alright, so those were the 5 most disappointing books of 2020. I hope that you might have enjoyed this video. It always feels so weird trying to outro these videos because, I don't know, do you want to enjoy them? Do you want to like feel a certain type of way about this kind of video? I don't know. I mean, I watch these videos and I really enjoy them, so hopefully if you're watching it, you also really enjoy these kind of videos. I'm really sorry if any of these were like your favorite books and I talked really negatively about them. I'm so sorry. It's nothing personal. They just did not work for me. And I'm really glad if they worked for you. It just wasn't really for me. Let me know down below in the comments which books did not work for you this year in 2020. I guess not this year, last year. Any of your most disappointing reads for 2020, let me know down below in the comments. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads. And I will see you all in my next video. Bye!
Ooh, I thought it'd be me and you.